I would like to introduce the speaker here who has agreed to speak on last minute notice is Mr. Leong Sze Hian. Actually, he also asked me to organize this lah. So I'd like to invite him up, and the live stream would continue. I understand that the turnout here is low, apart from like some media and some people who have turned up here who are under the shades of the tree, because given it's hot and I'm like sweaty right now. So I'd like to invite Mr. Leong Sze Hian up, please. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu, for saboing me, because you just told me that I'm the only speaker today, and you are the organizer and the MC. Thank you very much.
Most welcome, and also yeah, I'm more than glad to organize this lah.
The next time you ask me to speak, I better check have other speakers or not. Anyway, it's not Prabhu's fault, I think. I understand that the regular speakers at the Speaker's Corner on Lim Park all either kena COVID or not free or out of town. Normally, when I come to Hong Lim Park Speaker's Corner to speak, it's always very short, sharp, concise, and to the point. 10 minutes, at the most 15 minutes. But today, my puppet master tells me that I have to try to speak for as long as possible. And so I'm going to start by telling you some personal stories about my experience in Sri Lanka. I've been to Sri Lanka a couple of times, and it all started in 2017 when a friend came to Singapore and introduced me to the high priest of a Buddhist foundation in Sri Lanka. My friend who used to live in Germany was a very famous personal coach in the world, and he was a full-time volunteer for the Buddhist foundation in Sri Lanka. Full-time volunteer means work for free lah, you know. Yeah. So she came, she introduced me to the high priest, and then they told me a fascinating story that I'm going to share with you now. And that's only in the interest of killing time. They told me that for the first time in the history of Sri Lanka, a Buddhist foundation was going to build an orphanage for homeless Tamil children. Now, there was like a 25-year civil war in Sri Lanka, and the former president of Sri Lanka, Rajapaksa, was credited with the man who ended the 25-year civil war, because he was the defense minister, right, and when his brother was the president. So there is a connection to today's protest in a sense. So, like I said, for the first time, history in the making, a Buddhist foundation in Sri Lanka was going to build an orphanage for homeless Tamil children after a 25-year civil war. As an analogy, can you imagine the Palestinians building an orphanage for homeless Christian children, or the Israelis building an orphanage for homeless Palestinian children? And here's the interesting part about this building of the orphanage. A German university architecture faculty had a social project, and the social project was to design this orphanage and to help them to build it. In fact, when I went to Sri Lanka, I met about 20 students from the German university who actually went there to physically, lay the foundation, the initial bricks for this orphanage. Now, the very funny thing was when I was told the Sri Lankans assumed that the Germans would pay for the orphanage. And the Germans assumed that the Sri Lankans would pay for the orphanage. And so there was no money. The cost was US $39,000 to build this orphanage for about 200 children, which is about 2 hours north of Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. When I heard this, the first thing I said was, oh, have you tried multilingual crowdfunding? And the high priest said to me, hey, Mr. Leong, what is multilingual crowdfunding? I said, well, as far as I know, it's not been done before, but maybe you should try. I was suggesting that they crowdfund the 39,000 US dollars globally and ask people from all over the world to translate this crowdfunding effort into their own language and share it with their friends. And so it happened. I think this is the first, if not the only crowdfunding effort from Sri Lanka where it was in French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, and of course English, Tamil, and what have you. So cut the long story short, they got their 39,000 US dollars and they built their orphanage. I was invited by the high priest to go to Sri Lanka to watch the cow giving ceremony. When he told me that, I was wondering, what is a cow giving ceremony? You see, every year, and this is about 2017, every year in the city of Jaffna, which was where the Tamil Tigers and the Civil War was the main action was there. They have a cow giving ceremony. They give away a few hundred cows to needy families, one cow per family. And so I made that arduous 7-hour trip overnight in a van to go from Colombo to Jaffna to witness the cow giving ceremony. And to my surprise, when I went there, I saw so many Singaporeans and Taiwanese because almost all the money for this cow giving ceremony were donated by Buddhists in Singapore and Taiwan. Now here's the best part. So the ceremony is about to start, right? So the high priest calls me and said, Mr. Leong, come. Can you hold this bowl of water for me? It's some very big, heavy silver bowl of holy water, very, very heavy, okay? And then I walk with him and he would bless every family, the cow, as he moved along. I tell you, I've never been so, my hands have never been so tired in my life because the bowl was really very, very heavy, right? I thoroughly enjoyed my few trips to Sri Lanka because every time I'm staying in the temple with the monks. And of course, if you stay in the temple, you only have vegetarian. But I must say, the monks in Sri Lanka are very nice. They knew possibly that I was, my stomach was dying with vegetarian food. So in the morning, they started cooking fish for me right in the temple. So let me get to the point of today's event.
While Uncle Leong is getting to the point of today's event, I'd like to also point out that the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, then was the defense minister, and his brother was the president, then Mahinda Rajapaksa. Then there is a lot of allegations and accusations of human rights abuses, and especially when the civil war was going down, they are cracked down on the Tamils or the liberation of Tamil tigers of Elam and all, where of course the history says that they won the civil war, but at what cost and at what price? So yeah, while I was filling in that portion, and you ready? Your point?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Most
Oh,
welcome.
I see you bought the T-shirt that I recommended to you. People and warriors. You see, yesterday I was at Yihua Emporium, which is just across the road from not too far away, a 2-minute walk from Lim Park. I saw this T-shirt selling at a super price of $9.90. So I suggested to Prabhu, hey, you should go and buy that one. And I'm so happy he has won it, because when I saw that T-shirt yesterday, the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, the people's warriors of Sri Lanka. You know how many thousands of Sri Lankans have died, went to jail, persecuted, exiled, fighting for transparency, accountability, democracy, and non-discrimination. I'm going to read to you now a police outrider and a security escort, a luxury limousine, a 20-minute ride down Singapore's East Coast Parkway to travel the 18 kilometers to the downtown hotel where he had been booked into for the night. This was published about 4 hours ago in what I would fondly call Singapore's most expensive newspaper. In a sense, it is Singapore's most expensive newspaper because I think we have to pay from taxpayers' money something like $180 million a year for 5 years to keep it going or something. As Prabhu has described to you, the former president of Sri Lanka is probably one of the worst dictators in modern history, having bankrupted his country, where they don't even have fuel, for the motorbikes or for the cars in Sri Lanka, because the government has run out of money to buy fuel as well as other necessities. If you look back at history, arguably the most famous dictator in modern times was Robert Mugabe, who was the Zimbabwean president. And of course, he bankrupted Zimbabwe a long time ago, before the Sri Lanka is being bankrupted now. Now, Robert Mugabe used to come very often to Singapore, very, very often, right? So he was under sanctions. He was banned in many countries, but he was always coming to Singapore. So if you go back to the year of 2012 to 2017 or so, you will see a lot of talk about, why is what is probably the greatest dictator in the world at that time, why does he keep coming to Singapore? Now, the Burmese generals, as reported in Myanmar, is alleged to have a lot of money in Singapore, right? And of course, there were sanctions in many countries against Myanmar. I have friends, Singaporean companies, who help the Myanmar people build their airport, build their TV station, and so on. In fact, it's a very interesting story about Myanmar and the Singapore connection. If you remember, many years ago, there was a saffron revolution in Myanmar, where the monks were protesting and they were being killed and jailed and tortured and whatever. And so a question was asked in the Singapore Parliament, do we supply arms to Myanmar? And the answer was something along the lines of yes, but recently not a lot. And we try to ensure that the arms that we supply to the military are not suitable for use against civilians. Now, as Prabhu is giggling, I wonder what kind of arms that Singapore was supplying to Myanmar that, as said in Parliament, is not suitable for use against civilians. You know, I just met a journalist from a foreign press, and he is a graduate of the University of Philippines. And you know, the current president of the Philippines, Mr. Marcos, is the son of Ferdinand Marcos. Of course, the most famous president arguably in Philippine history, because among other things, the Philippines government sued the Marcos family in Singapore to try to recover some of the assets in Singapore from the Marcos family back to the Philippines government. Anyway, the judgment was that the Philippine government lost and the Marcos family were able to keep their assets in Singapore. 1MDB Malaysia. You know, recently we had a government official from Singapore who went to visit Malaysia and went to visit the former Prime Minister who has been found guilty in relation to the 1MDB scandal. You should read the Malaysian news as to how angry the Malaysians were that a Singapore government official, a minister, went to Malaysia and met with this former Prime Minister. And of course, in 1MDB, if you read the book, the Malaysian book, the 1MDB scandal that brought down a government, it cites the Malaysian Auditor General that much of the money laundered went through Singapore at some point in time. So, why do we welcome someone whom most people don't welcome today? And I think that's as long as I've ever spoken in Lim Park. Thank you.
So, that being said, the question again is, why are we welcoming these people